Welcome to Grapple Arts Radio.
Hello everybody, it's Stephan Kesting here. Today I'm interviewing Sarah Kaufman. Sarah is depending who you look at, in the top 5 pound-for-pound female fighters right now. She's the current Hardcore Fighting Championship champion, the former Strikeforce champion. Always a very exciting fight, so I'm super glad to be interviewing her today. How are you doing today, Sarah?
I'm doing very well, thanks, Stephan.
Okay. So just to put things in context, we're interviewing here somebody who's fighting, who's currently active as a fighter. When was your last fight, and when's your next fight?
Well, my last fight was, as of today, which is May 2nd, was exactly a month ago. I actually fought at the AFC in Victoria, British Columbia, which is my hometown, and I fought Megumi Yabashida, who is, definitely a veteran of the sport, 15 years experience. And as of right now, I'm not 100% sure when my next fight will be, but I'm hoping that it's going to be June or July.
Okay. So you're kind of in the off-season as much as you can be. Now, recently George St. Pierre was saying that the difference between a martial artist and a fighter is that a fighter only trains when they've got a fight coming up, whereas a martial artist is training all the time. So did you train today, or are you going to train later on today?
I actually already trained twice today. So I got up this morning and I went out to the sports center, which is out at Camosun College, where all the national and a lot of the Olympic Canadian athletes train out of. And I trained with Tyler Goodale doing my weights. We didn't do conditioning because I don't have a fight in the immediate future. So right now, kind of working on speed and power. So we're doing a lot of, jumping and throwing, power cleans, that kind of thing, bench press with chains. And then after that session, I came to Zuma, where I train, and I did a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class with some rolling at the end of it. Okay.
Are you doing anything else later on today, or is that it for the day?
Tonight I'll probably be doing either a little bit more Jiu-Jitsu, or I'll do a stand-up session.
Okay. Is that a fairly typical day for you?
I would say so. I'd say on an average day, even on essentially my off-season, I'd probably train still about twice a day. And then we do have lunchtime classes, so I'll jump into some of the lunchtime classes. And they won't necessarily all be super hard training sessions, just working on different technique, especially in between fights, trying to improve, on kind of every area I can.
I'm really picking on this one area because I get so many people asking me how fighters, such as yourself or such as any big name, balance all the different things they need to do. I mean, obviously you need to do conditioning, striking, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, and that's a lot of different things as opposed to somebody who just, a boxer, okay, they got to do conditioning and they got to box. But it's mixed martial arts. So how do you go about mixing those 4 areas? How do you go about prioritizing them and mixing them up in a week?
Well, I think, the hard part is, training all those different aspects, and then also training to get them put together, are totally different as well. So I would say for me, the majority of my week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday mornings, I generally do my strength training, so I'll do my weightlifting, and oftentimes I'll do a conditioning session after that point, whether it's hill sprints or an Airdyne workout, or,
An Airdyne, that's the bike with the handles.
It's terrible. It is the bike with the handles, and it's powered on it. You produce watts because it's a big fan, and so the harder you pedal, the more watts you produce, the higher the resistance is. So it's terrible, but great. So I do Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I do those sessions in the morning. Oftentimes Monday, Wednesday, I'll do some jiu-jitsu at lunch, and then in the evening either do some striking or some more jiu-jitsu. Tuesday, Thursdays, again, depending on the day, sometimes I'll do a conditioning session in the morning with maybe some Thai boxing or boxing at lunch, and then in the evening, depending on what's going on, do some no-gi grappling or some, MMA grappling, although MMA grappling is usually closer to a fight time, just so we're not getting cut up. And then Friday evenings are the one session where it mixes up quite a bit, so sometimes we'll do grappling, sometimes we'll do MMA sparring or just boxing sparring. Mix that up, and then almost always Saturday mornings is our stand-up wrestling day.
Okay. So how many times of the week are you actually sparring? And I guess there we got to distinguish between sparring within the discipline and sort of all-out MMA sparring.
I would say I don't do a lot of all-out MMA sparring until closer towards my fights. For the majority of our sparring, we'll either do grappling sparring or, stand-up wrestling or boxing or kickboxing. And then as it gets closer to a fight, we'll start throwing in boxing with takedowns and full MMA and that kind of thing. But for the most part, I'd say in between fights, we really focus on the disciplines by themselves and then the setups for, setting up your wrestling shots or, getting up off the ground or throwing punches on the ground, that kind of thing.
All right. Okay. Surprise, surprise, you got a fight 4 weeks or 5 weeks from today. How would you change it? What are the things that would change? And then what would your average day or week of preparation look like when you're actually in camp?
I think the main things that change when we're coming up towards a fight are the intensity of the sessions. So instead of doing 3-minute sparring rounds, we're going to jump them up to 5 and then 6-minute sparring rounds. Instead of, same thing on the ground, instead of doing just free rolling, we'll roll for a round length of time. So a little bit more intense and focusing, depending on the person I'm fighting, on maybe focusing on getting up off the bottom or focusing on staying on top or getting to the top or, staying on the inside in boxing, throwing lots of combos versus staying on the outside and picking someone apart. So the training gets a little bit more specific in terms of the style of person I'm fighting, but also the duration of the sessions. A lot of times actually we'll get a little bit more compact and, in pad work, instead of alternating, holding around and then hitting around, we'll, hit 3 or 4 rounds in a row and then switch off. So
okay.
I'd say the intensity changes substantially when it's coming up towards the fight time.
So then what's the ratio of sparring to technical training in camp?
I would say it's probably 40-60 maybe. So we still do a lot of technical work with Adam Zuchek at our training camps.
So Adam Zuchek is your coach and my friend who runs Zuma Martial Arts in Victoria.
Yes.
So I just wanted to get that plug in there very subtly. Okay, so with all that increased workload, or at least the increased intensity, have you ever overtrained? What are your signs and symptoms of overtraining?
I would say that I personally could easily overtrain because I always feel like I should do more or could do more or need to do more. And I really rely on Adam to set the tone of what's happening in each camp and what I need to do. And Adam and I, now that I've had 14 fights now, so I think we're both getting to know what's expected of kind of the other person and also the signs for me, What are the signs for you? Yeah, I would say that, especially if I'm feeling really sluggish on, maybe like a Wednesday or a Thursday, it could have been from a hard Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, knowing that I'm going to have a hard Friday, Saturday. We might do a lighter session on a Thursday where it's mostly technical work. I'm pretty lucky myself in terms of injuries that I haven't really had any. So I'm not someone who has like a recurring injury that gets flared up or anything like that. But I think, and a couple times I've gotten somewhat of like a rundown, almost cold or flu where, you just feel off. And generally for me, that's a sign of, okay, I need to take a day where I just do a little bit of a lighter workout, get a sweat going, and that's about it. And Adam's really in tune with that, I think that as well. And he'll take a look at both myself and all the guys. And, if they're walking around a little bit slower even or just kind of starting to complain about niggling, being really sore or certain things like that, a lot of times we'll take a day where it's, we've had 3 hard days and it's time for a little bit of a lighter day and then knowing that we're going to go hard in a couple of days again.
Okay. So when you're in harder training, do you do anything extra for recovery? Or do you take any supplements to help you recover or massage therapy or
I personally don't take too many supplements myself. I do a couple different things. I'll start incorporating some ice baths and some Epsom salt baths. So if I'm feeling, especially like muscle sore, a lot of times I'll do an Epsom salt bath, which for me is, I don't really measure how much Epsom salts I put in, but if I have, generally I think about 1 kilo bags, I'll put in about a third of the bag, so probably 2 cups of Epsom salts, and then as hot as I can possibly stand, and just start sweating out, a lot of like the muscle tightness and soreness. And then after that session, so I'd be about 20 minutes, I'll do a nice long stretch to really make sure that the muscles from all the strenuous activity aren't getting too tight. And then I might do that on a Wednesday of a Monday to Saturday sort of training regime. I might do that on a Wednesday, and a lot of times on the Saturday after, so pretty much the end of the week for me, I would do an Epsom salt bath. Not an Epsom salt bath. On the Saturday, I would do an ice bath, which
hardcore.
Is in Victoria anyway. It's pretty much tap water on cold, and then I throw in, maybe like a tray of ice cubes and sit in there for about 15 minutes. And I find that really helps with just, muscle inflammation and the joint inflammation, and just kind of getting the body like awake again after such a long week.
Mm-hmm. Just out of interest, how many hours a night do you sleep with recovery? Sleeping is so important for recovery.
Yeah, I probably don't sleep enough. I've never been a really good sleeper. So I would say for me, I sleep somewhere between 4 to maybe 7 hours a night.
Oh, my God, one of these people.
It's 4 to 5.5.
Wow. Do you find that works for you?
For me, it does. I generally don't feel like I get run down, and I just don't sleep very well as it is. So if I feel really tired and I try and go to bed at like 10 or 11, I'm up by 3 in the morning. So I usually just stay up till, at least midnight, if not 1 or 2, and then go to bed and get up around, somewhere between 6:30 and at the latest 8.
Okay. Well, I guess you're genetically blessed that way to be able to get by on. I know if I did that and I'm not training anywhere near as hard as you, I'd just completely fall apart. So before anybody else out there listening to this podcast gets any silly ideas, there's genetic variability here.
Yeah, I know other fighters who will sleep, especially in a fight camp, they'll try and get 8 to 10 hours of sleep a night, which it is good for recovery in terms of your muscles, just having that time to relax and recoup. And I actually like to try and make sure that I eat some protein right before I go to bed, whether it's, a chicken breast or it's just some cottage cheese or even a protein shake, just for all the extra training, just to help that recovery as well.
Okay. Well, that leads us very nicely into the next question, which is nutrition. And now that you've admitted that, you sleep a ridiculously short amount of time, you're probably going to tell us that you eat Big Macs and fries every day.
No, I actually, for the most part, believe it or not, I kind of eat my fight diet, nutrition all the time. I'm a pretty picky eater, so for myself, I don't really like to stray too far and have too many flavors on my food. So I would say on an average day and for a fight coming up, pretty much in the morning I eat either eggs and egg whites with oatmeal, or I'll have a protein shake with like greens and berry powder in it. Then I'll have a similar kind of meal after my first workout, whether it's a protein bar or a protein shake, usually an apple or some sort of fruit. For lunch and dinner, I pretty much have the same thing most of the time, which is a chicken breast and then vegetables, either a spinach salad with broccoli and cucumbers and peppers and that kind of thing on it. I mean, I usually don't really use much dressing. And for dinner, I'll have pretty much the same thing, and that's my standard eating almost all the time.
Okay. Do you count calories?
I don't. For myself, I walk around between about generally 153 to 155 in between fights, and then I fight at 135 pounds. So I get down to about 146, 147, 148, somewhere in there during my fight camp. And for me, I really just do that, just the extra workouts for the most part, just drop my weight. And I don't really have to limit what I'm eating for the most part. I just make sure that I'm not having any treats, any sweets, that kind of thing, and just eat really clean. And I drop that weight, and then I cut the water from there. So the extra 6 or 7 pounds I have to drop really isn't too bad. So I don't worry about counting calories. Okay.
So if you're cutting 6 or 7 pounds of water.
Sorry, I cut 6 or 7 pounds of actual weight to get to the point where I cut about 12 pounds of water.
Okay. So then how much of that 12 to 18 pounds do you get back by fight night?
Generally by fight night, I usually weigh in about 135, and then by fight night, I'm usually about 149 to 151.
Okay. Can you give us some tips on how you make up that weight after your weight cut?
Everyone does something a little bit different. For me, some people really like to do an IV, where essentially you're getting the nutrients and the electrolytes straight back into your blood system, whereas I have never done an IV, so I just don't bother. And for the most part, as soon as I weigh in, I'll drink Pedialyte, and then I make a protein shake that's similar to my morning shake, but I add in, so I do usually 2 scoops of vanilla protein, I do a scoop of berry powder, I do a scoop of greens, and then I do a scoop of maltodextrin and then another scoop of dextrose, just for those extra sugars. So first off, I'll drink those. Then, I'll have them water as well. And then, throughout the next day, I'll alternate between drinking water and drinking like another Pedialyte, as well as like some Powerades or some Gatorade, something that, again, has like the sugars and the electrolytes and the carbs to kind of replenish my body. And then I pretty much eat normally. So I'll eat, we'll go for dinner, and I'll usually try and have a good meal of chicken and, vegetables, maybe some potatoes just for a little bit of that starch, or maybe a little bit of pasta. And then I always get garlic bread with cheese because I just...
Yeah. That's your kryptonite.
It is.
Yeah. Oh, well, everyone needs a weakness or an indulgence.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, recently I was talking with Adam, who is your primary coach, and he was throwing some numbers around for what you were doing for weightlifting. And the reason I want to mention specific numbers is because everybody enjoys comparing themselves to pro athletes, right? And so can you tell us what you're bench pressing with chains, or what you're squatting, or how much wattage you can produce on the Aerodyne bike for how long?
Well, I think it kind of depends on the day and the different things that we're doing. But
just go with the best numbers ever then.
I think at one point when I was doing back squats, I think I was around 3 plates, but those were just to parallel. They weren't to below parallel. So when I'm doing below parallel, I've switched to kilos now, and I think I was doing about, 100 kilos maybe? Maybe a bit more.
Which would be 220 pounds.
Yeah,
for American listeners.
To 250 maybe. And then, what else?
The first thing I wanted to say is that's strong for a girl, but I've got to revise that by saying that's strong for anybody. There's not a lot of guys who are out there squatting 3 plates aside down to parallel or roughly parallel. I mean, that's really unusual to see that in the gym. So is that kind of leg and back strength thing you've always had, or is this something that you've really managed to develop?
Well, I would like to say that I carry a larger bottom half, so I do have quite a large butt, and I've always had kind of stronger legs, I suppose, even, growing up I always did. But it's definitely something that we've been working on, and with my trainer, Ty Goodale, who does my strength and conditioning, we've really been focusing on, because I put on muscle fast and I'm obviously have to make a weight category, focusing a little bit more on using the heavier weight to gain more explosiveness and speed, as opposed to, put on size and strength in that traditional sense. So we've been doing lately a lot of, kind of supersets of, we've been doing a trap bar deadlift, which if you don't know what that is, as opposed to the regular bar, you stand inside the bar that's kind of like a hexagon, and you do a deadlift that way, standing up with it. So we were kind of doing like a big circuit, for example, of, trap bar deadlifts with chains, to then just trap bar deadlifts, to then hang snatches, to then box jumps. So kind of going from heavier to lighter to really working on that explosiveness. And we've been doing a lot of sets like that, involving the upper body as well. And I think that it's really been beneficial to increasing my strength and explosiveness without necessarily putting on that size.
Okay. So starting with a heavy lift and then going on to do explosive exercises for roughly the same body part immediately afterwards.
Exactly.
Okay. What about running? Do you do any long, slow running, or are you all sprints?
For the most part, I would say I pretty much just do sprints, especially for the conditioning portion, because a slow endurance run really is the opposite of everything that for MMA that we're going for, where it's, a short I'm relatively short, 5-minute session where you're kind of exploding throughout that 5 minutes, but then you're done. So you don't need to be able to do a slow 5 minutes. You need to be able to do that fast 5 minutes. So the majority of my training sessions involving running would be incline sprinting or hill sprints or flat sprints, that kind of thing. But then just for kind of weight maintenance, even though my trainer Tyler does not like it, but Adam doesn't mind it, I'll do like maybe a Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, or Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday, just kind of like jog just to get everything warm and loose and just get a light sweat going. But I wouldn't really run for more than 25 to 30 minutes tops. Okay.
What would be a standard sprint protocol, say on a treadmill, if you can tell us what the inclines are and the numbers are?
Ones. One of the worst ones that we do is on an incline, somewhere between 8 to 10 incline, and somewhere between 8 to 10 speed, or
miles per hour.
9 to 11 speed. And so we'll do like 20 seconds sprinting, 10 seconds rest. So do 10 sets of that. So that's 5 minutes. And then as the fights get closer, instead of having a 3-minute break, which is almost total rest, we'd have like a 1-minute break. And then do 15 seconds sprinting, 15 seconds on the side for 10 sets. And then again another break. And then either another set of 15 seconds and then go down to 10 seconds on, 20 seconds off, depending on how many rounds of 5 minutes that we're going to be doing.
Okay. So starting out with the standard Tabata interval timing, the 20 seconds on, 10 seconds rest, and then gradually increasing the rest, but keeping...
Exactly. So going from a work rate of 2 to 1 to a work rate of 1 to 1 to a work rate of 1 to 2.
Okay. Okay, this might be a dumb question, but have you ever gotten really tired in a fight?
No.
Okay.
I would say no. I've been somewhat tired, but I would never say I've been exhausted in a fight ever. And I think that's important because you don't want to be at that point where you think you're going to die and they're still going. So I definitely think that I've always been in better conditioning shape than my opponents.
That must be nice to know.
For me, especially, it is because I've had training camps where, I've had one day where I'm just like, Adam, I shouldn't fight, a week out from the fight. My conditioning's terrible, and he's going, you're an idiot. And then the next day, I've done like a fair conditioning session, and then an hour later done a stand-up wrestling session with a new, fresh guy every 3 minutes out of a 6-minute round, and they were gassing and I wasn't. But, there's just always certain days where even in training camp, even if you have that conditioning, for whatever reason you're overtired or, it's just a bad day, you feel like it's not good, but then when you have those sessions where you realize, like, oh, I actually do have good conditioning, is mentally very reassuring.
Okay, so I think people are beginning to get the idea that if you're going to fight MMA, you can't just be a pure striker, you can't just be a pure wrestler, you can't be just a pure jiu-jitsu player. But you mentioned earlier that you're training the transitions between these. Can you give us some examples of some drills or techniques that would be transitioning between striking and grappling, between grappling and wrestling, between wrestling and striking? Could you give us some examples of what you're talking about there, Sarah?
Yeah, well, I think some of the examples would be just working your entrances into wrestling off of someone, even jabbing. So doing setups where I jab, they jab back, and I'm using that jab to drop under to go for my wrestling shot. Other examples would be using kind of like an up and down motion in your striking. So maybe you jab high, you cross low to their body, so you're getting them going up and down. You come back up to their head so that you get their body weight to come up, and then again you drop down low for a shot. That kind of motion where you're forcing them to do one thing and then you're countering to do another. You can even do the same thing, working on catching leg kicks to set up your shots. Using your knees as someone else is shooting in for striking off of someone else shooting. On the ground, we have a lot of different drills that Adam's come up with and other people have come up with, using kind of punching to pass the guard. So punching from in the guard, standing up, breaking their guard by, getting them confused a little bit by hitting them, peppering them with those shots to then pass into knee mount or mount and striking from there as well. So all those sorts of transitions. I think when I first started myself in the sport of mixed martial arts, I would say, striking was my stronger suit, wrestling I wasn't great at, and grappling I was okay at. And then those areas started to get better, but still the transitions weren't quite there. And I still feel like I'm working on them, but I definitely feel like they're the most important part now for me in my game to get everything put together.
So then what got you into MMA in the first place?
I really think for me, going into the sport, I started out doing the Thai boxing with Adam, really as, just a different form of exercise that was, I danced my whole life, and it was kind of the other end of the spectrum. I got to be a little bit physical and hit things, and it was really exhilarating and a lot of fun. And then I couldn't stop. So from the kickboxing, I wanted to get better at the Thai boxing. And then I saw people doing the grappling, and that looked like fun. So I tried doing that, and I was terrible at that. So then I needed to get better at that. And then I'm a competitive person, so I wanted to kind of put it to use. And I started doing some smaller, local tournaments over in Vancouver. And one of the girls, Liz Posner, that I had competed against in some of the tournaments, she was looking to do her second MMA fight, and they were looking kind of for an opponent, and she told the promoter that I might be interested. And, Adam presented it to me. I said yes, and, that was, I think, his first student fighting in an MMA fight, and it was my first fight. So we've definitely both grown in the sport together, and I kind of couldn't stop.
Okay. So maybe another stupid question, were you afraid the first time you stepped into an MMA fight?
For me, my first fight, I was most nervous about losing, and I also didn't know what to expect. So I had done the tournaments with the Thai boxing, and I'd done pretty well in the kickboxing, and I'd done the tournaments with the grappling, and I'd always done really well in the grappling, but I had never really fully put it together. And I really didn't know what to expect. I came out first, and Liz came out second, and I actually found myself kind of grooving a bit to the music and just smiling and kind of joking with Adam, at how intense she was before the fight, and I just wasn't. And from that point, I think I realized that, I've put in hard work and I can win a fight. So there's always going to be that nervousness of I want to win and I don't want to lose and I want to perform well. But at the same time, for me, I've put in the training. I trust my coach entirely, and I think that's really the important part. And that's what allows me to not be too nervous, is trusting in the coach and the training and my training partners. Okay.
Well, I guess the two questions I definitely want to ask, and they're related, but they're different. The first is, what advice would you have for somebody who wants to get started in MMA? And the second thing I want to ask is, what advice would you have for a woman who wants to get started training in any combat sport, not necessarily with the goal of competing, but just for fitness and self-defense and self-confidence?
I would say, kind of in response to both those questions, the most important thing is finding somewhere where you're happy training and comfortable training. I see a lot of people who will go to a gym because they hear of the name or they hear of, this gym, they have really tough people and they're really good. But then they get there and it's not their vibe. Maybe maybe they want a gym that has aggressive people, or maybe they want a gym that's a little bit more laid back and has a little bit more of a family community, which for me, I think the important thing in terms of getting involved in training is just finding that gym that works for you with a coach who works for you. We're pretty lucky at Zuma. We really have a big family, a big community, a big team. You guys are kind of the same way, I'm sure, at your gym, but as you know, Adam, and I know Adam, he is very much a very sensitive guy who knows a lot of things, and he can't be around negative people, and so it's really brought together a positive training team, which, allows you to try things in training where you're not worried about getting hurt, you're not worried about getting knocked out because someone has a beef with you. You're trying things to improve, and as a whole, as a team trying to improve. So people who want to get into fighting, they need to find that team that works for them. And before they even think about fighting, is start training. And train to get good at training before you think about stepping in the cage. Because, You could have the best jiu-jitsu in the world, a high-level black belt, and you get punched once in the face, and it's gone. So if someone hasn't done a lot of training, people who are really skilled have that problem. So people who don't have as much skill, who just want to get in there and fight to be tough, can end up getting hurt. So I'd say to those people, train first, and if fighting comes about, great, if that's something you want to do. And for the ladies, again, just find a positive training atmosphere. Find whether it's a female or a male coach who inspires you to want to learn, to want to train, and have a good time with your training. I don't think you can take it too seriously, especially right at the beginning, because, if I had taken myself seriously and thought about fighting right away, I would have been so discouraged based on how terrible I was. So anyone can get good. It's just a matter of putting that time in there.
Okay. Now, I think with MMA becoming more popular, people are getting a little bit less weirded out by the idea of rolling around on the ground with other people who are wearing spandex or even less. But I would imagine that the ick factor of that would be amplified for most women, especially if they haven't had the contact of previous contact combat sports. So any words of advice for dealing with that from a female perspective?
I think a lot of females would have trouble going, especially if they haven't really done a lot of grappling or jiu-jitsu before, might have an issue going into a class that has a majority of males because they're not kind of comfortable in those positions where at first it is awkward and, you're not used to being in these positions doing a sport. And so if you can find a gym that does have females there, that's definitely a very big support system to kind of break through that comfort barrier. But I think you also really have to look at the sport for what it is and try and take your mind off of, I'm not a close contact person. I don't like being hugged. I don't like people kind of in my personal bubble, yet when I'm grappling, I don't have that issue. And it's really probably based on the fact that I have a goal in mind, and that's to use technique and use, strength and use their momentum and their weight distribution to do different things. And you really have to kind of open your mind to that, where this is technique, this isn't people in my personal space, which at first can definitely be hard.
All right. Well, I guess my last question for you then is, in your time around the sport and watching other fighters come and go and people who say they want to fight starting out training hard and then fighting once or twice and then fading away. So what separates the champions and the best of the best from the people who don't quite make it or end up dropping out along the way?
I think one thing that separates a lot of people from being a champion, and the main thing is work ethic. You have to want to work, and you have to want to work through the days where you don't want to work. You have to be able to push through those. And a lot of people have trouble with that self-motivation or want it just to come easy. They want the notoriety of someone who's done well. They want the fame of someone who's fought on a worldwide stage and people recognize them, but they don't want to put in that time. So it's the people who, after a fight, whether they win or lose, are, back in the gym, either training, 2 days later, or even just back in the gym just to work on their technique or just to hang out with their team. I think that really separates the people who do well versus the people who maybe fight once and disappear. It's putting in that work and knowing that after a fight you have to get back in that gym and do it all over again and try and get better. So.
Well, Adam has a great story about you. I think it was one of your early MMA fights where the other girl went out partying and you went to bed, and the two of you passed each other in the hallway, you going out for a run the morning after your fight and her coming in from the bars and the nightclubs. Is there any truth to that rumor?
Yeah, that was actually after every single fight that I've fought, I've gone for a run the very next morning, regardless of, we've had flights where we had to leave the hotel at 6 in the morning, and I've gotten up at 4 a.m. to get that run in. And I think for me, it really helps me keep that focus of, you know what, whether I won the fight or I lost the fight, I wasn't perfect and I have to get better. And so I've gone for a run after every single fight.
Wow, that's an amazing ritual. Amazing habit. Awesome. Well, Sarah, thank you very much for talking to me today. I think that was a really interesting bunch of information you gave us.
Yeah, I had a great time, and, well, thanks, Stephan.
All right. Take care.
Have a great day. Bye.
In addition to these podcasts, I also put out a regular newsletter on training. It's very, very jiu-jitsu centered. It's a ton of in-depth information about different aspects, different techniques, different tricks, different tactics, different training methods around jiu-jitsu, ground fighting, no-gi grappling, and even MMA a little bit. So if you go to grapplearts.com/newsletter, you can sign up for free. If you don't like what you get, there's an unsubscribe button at the bottom of every single email you're ever going to get. We'll part as friends, no harm done, you tried it out. But I get a lot of feedback from people saying that they found these emails super useful in their training, even a little bit inspirational. So go to grapplearts.com/newsletter and try it out. It's completely free. It always will be. There's no obligation. It's really easy to leave if you don't like what I give you, all right? Check it out. Take care. Good luck with your training.